All right. So, what are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about this idea which I've sort of danced around quite a bit, sort of not talked about it, but not gone out and said it. It is this idea of logos. What is the logos? What does it mean? Um, what is it about? It's a very, I would say, this idea, at least in the Neoplatonic sense, has had a resurgence in the advent of a lot of modern cognitive science. But I think there's still this idea, and I think it's very pervasive, and I don't think it's completely wrong, right? Um, that logos just means logic. And to some extent, it does mean logic. To some extent, that's a way of thinking about it. Now, of course, I think a lot of people, the relation with it is ethos, pathos, and logos, right? Those are the three things that we know are in the world. You know what I mean? And in good writing, it's what my teachers always said. Oh, you got to have all these things to make a good argument. Um, and I agree. But when we want to really get at what it means, I think we need to go back to where this term started, certainly in a metaphysical and philosophical standpoint, because I think it lays the groundwork. I don't just think it does lay the groundwork for a lot of future ideas, um, and really lays so much of the groundwork for Christian theology, especially Trinitarian theology, talking about this Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. It's very much so ingrained throughout Western society. So let's go back to where this idea began. Well, it's originally a Stoic idea. Now, Stoics aren't just, oh, I don't care about I don't care about anything. I don't care about anything. I feel like that's what we think Stoic means. Doesn't mean stabbing yourself and being cool with it. That's not what it means. Certainly, it didn't mean that at the time, right? But so what is Stoicism? What is it about? Well, I don't want to go too much into it, right? But it talks a lot about understanding the world as what is in our control, what's beyond our control. But they came up with this idea, and they talk a lot about this idea of logos. And they talk about it in relation to the way of nature, the natural way. And so when they talk about living a good life, living a fulfilled life, living a right life, they say we want to live in accordance with nature. Because Stoics aren't about doing whatever you want. They're not about making money. They're certainly not about fame or glory. None of that. In fact, Marcus Aurelius says um, it is possible to be happy even in a castle, right? Or even in a palace. He's saying that because you can be happy anywhere, right? That's his belief. That's the Stoic belief. You can have strength and meaning anywhere. But it's far more difficult in a palace than anywhere else because you have all these, carnal pleasures around you. The point being, living in accordance with nature means living in accordance with what is the way for me, right? What is the man, right? What is my purpose? What's my point as human being, as a father or as a son? And so this idea of logos is, well, certainly it's applied in many areas, a vast array of areas, but at least in this relation, is, well, what is the father? What is a father? That's the question we should ask, right? What what really would be the perfect father? Now, I'm not talking about God. I don't it doesn't matter for right now. Remove the all the theology, all this stuff, doesn't matter. But what is the perfect father? Right? Perfect being not the best according to my flawed perception, but perfect according to nature, right? The logos is not the logos. First of all, I want to get this idea. The logos. There's two sort of ideas. There's the logos, which is all things, but then there's I. This microphone has a logos. This book has a logos. And through it all, there is one logos. You're saying this makes no sense. I understand what you mean. It's a lot. It's a lot. But think about it like this, right? Each individual thing is has its point, has its purpose, has its guide, has the perfect, could be this perfect version, right? Or has a perfect version of itself. There's a perfect microphone. This is sort of a Platonic idea, but there's a perfect microphone. There's a perfect, um, ecosystem. There's a perfect animal. There's a perfect all of these things. And so what we're doing through life, through evolution, through all these things, is trying to move closer to that logos, to that perfection. Not only in our own individual selves, but in a larger communal whole. And so, what is then, the logos of this? Well, the logos of this would be the perfect version of this. This is an aspect of that perfect version, right? And I think now it's important to sort of bring in a idea, a Platonic idea, where Plato says to know something, right? To know what something is, you must conform to it. So what does that mean? At least in relation to what we're talking about. It means to know the logos, means to be more like the logos, right? To conform more to it, right? So as we try to understand what is the perfect father supposed to act like, as I begin to know it, right? Not just syllogistically, meaning not just, good fathers do this, and so, I should do this because all good fathers do this and I want to be a good father. But actually embodying it, being it, right? And I think now it's sort of important to bring in some of this Christian idea because I think they do a lot of work, Christians do a lot of work, and Christianity as a whole does a lot of work of moving this idea from just like a sort of ethereal, I'm supposed to live in accordance with nature, which I think makes sense, and I think, Marcus Aurelius talks a lot about this, but into something that's more tangible and I think easier to understand, easier to digest. Well, John chapter 1 um, says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, right? But that word, that literal word that's used there, is logos. In the beginning was the logos, and the logos was with God, and the logos was God. And I think this can also help our conception of God. Too many people, I think, these new atheists talk about God, or at least did talk about God as like this guy, like as in he's like just the best being, you know what I mean, the most powerful being. But that's not what Christians, I think, or what the Bible is teaching, and what most Christian theology teaches about what God is. God is beyond being. God is beyond all being. He is not a being, he is being. And I think this is the idea that's expressed in this. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was God, right? And the Word was with God, right? It's through all things, it's all being. The Logos is all being, and the Logos is with God, right? And I think this idea sort of brings it into, well, what is, if we can understand sort of more, a little bit more about God, we can understand this Logos thing a little better. Right? God is this perfect being, perfect. Well, I guess not perfect being, as in perfect being. Uh, God is perfect being, as in um, God is within me in my ability to be more perfect. Right? He represents, at least in our mind, this logos which is always infinitely far away from us, because infinity is always as far, right? You take 2 steps forward, you're still infinitely away. It's the same distance away, right? Same infinite amount of space away, right? It's this idea that's infinitely far, and yet one we must always try to conform to. It's this infinite good, this thing that we're unworthy of, we can't achieve, and yet we must still try to achieve. Right? We can't. It's like saying, can I create a perfect chair? Right? Bringing back to this logos idea, and the logos and God are very in parallel. But bringing back to this logos idea, can I make a perfect chair? Well, that would be to be the logos of the chair. You see what I mean? Right? That would be to be this perfect thing. And I'm always infinitely far from this perfect chair. Right? I can get closer in the sense that I can be further from the things I have been, but I can't achieve it. Because you can't achieve perfection. Truly, you can't. And so, right, God is this perfect being, perfect thing. The Logos is this perfect living, perfect understanding that we're always infinitely far from. And we're always trying to understand, right? Trying to know, right? That's why people say, I'm trying to know God. Because what am I trying to know? I'm not trying to just know, as in like understand. I'm trying to conform to God, as Plato said, right? And I think it's important when we're bringing this into us, right? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for my life? Well, I like to think about this idea of sin. People think of sin as like killing somebody. That's a sin, right? That is a sin. It's bad. But I like the Sermon on the Mount. I think it's obviously a beautiful episode, but what it's getting at, what Jesus is getting at, or at least the writers in this sense, presumably Jesus, and I believe Jesus, but even to anybody, right? The words that were written, what are these words getting at? Even if you're atheist, these words are still getting at the same thought, right? Um, so what are these words getting at? They're getting at this idea, again, that you know the one who has coveted his neighbor's wife has committed adultery. That's the idea. That it's not about this. Again, this is the Platonic idea that it's not to be godly, I guess, in this sense, or to live in the way of nature. Some say the Tao is very similar to, well, not very similar. There's some similarity with the Stoicism in this idea, right? The Stoics have this logos. Taoism has this Tao, right? This natural way. Christianity has God, right? Again, this natural way. And so to be the natural way is not just to not do the things that are bad, but it is to be the things that are perfect, to be more perfect. And to sin is to, as the original Greek meant, was to miss the mark. Like you're shooting an arrow. It actually means in archery, you're shooting an arrow and you don't hit the bullseye, right? You don't hit what you're exactly aiming for. And so when we think about this in relation to this idea we've been working on, this idea we've been discussing as in I've been trying to articulate the best way I can, but hopefully there's some further discussion in the sense that you comment something. But when we think about this idea in terms of logos or in terms of God, or in terms of the Tao, what does it mean? It means not achieving the Logos, not achieving the Tao, not achieving this perfection which God is. And so, in that, you are always sinning, right? Everything you do is a sin, in the sense that it's a missing of the mark, right? Because you're not achieving perfect thought, right? You're not, you are not God. God is with you, though, right? This idea is that, like,